Making trades before the NFL season starts is completely dependent on ADP and where you drafted certain players. This applies to if you're trying to buy a player or sell a player. So we're going to go through some sell high players today before 2025 fantasy football, but it is important to keep that in mind as we go through each of these players. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And if you're just as excited about this season as I am. Now, getting into our first guy right here, I have discussed him throughout the offseason. And I just haven't been big on T. Higgins' price all offseason long. Now, I want to make this one clear. I am a big T. Higgins guy. In fact, I won $15,000, actually $19,000 in best ball last year. And T. Higgins was a central piece in me winning all that money last year on Underdog. So I love T. Higgins. He has a special place in my heart. But this is an interesting one to me because in redraft leagues, which is where his price is 27.9 ADP on ESPN and 30.2 ADP on Yahoo, it has never been a year that has gone by where he is always considered a must-start type of guy. I can't tell you the amount of years I've been doing this and having the same question a couple times a year, which is, should I bench T. Higgins this week? Should I bench T. Higgins in place of a wide receiver 4 in all normal times? T. Higgins is never a must-start player in redraft leagues. And I think it's important that people remember that because T. Higgins has a boomer-bust nature to him. You could just look at his game log last year alone, and you could see amount of games that he did nothing in because he is a wide receiver 2 on his own offense. That is the danger with drafting a wide receiver 2 this high, as opposed to last year, you could get T. Higgins in the 5th round, in the 4th round, in the 6th round sometimes in 2024 drafts. But in 2025 fantasy drafts, you're having to pay a 2nd or 3rd round premium for a guy like T. Higgins. And I think it is just too high if you cannot certainly say to yourself every single week, I could put T. Higgins in my lineup and never have to worry about my 3rd round pick being a bust for me. You can't say that. Now, the one caveat with this is if you do have the Joe Burrow and T. Higgins stack, you have no business sending away T. Higgins. If you have that Cincinnati Bengals stack with either Jamar Chase or T. Higgins and Joe Burrow, you cannot send any of those players away because that is the elite stack of the elite. So you need to hold on to him if you have Burrow. But if you do not have Joe Burrow on the same team, a trade that I would like to proceed with is keep in mind the only way you're going to make a trade happen before the actual NFL season starts is if everybody in the deal feels like they're getting a win. And the only way that both sides will feel like they're getting a win is if ADP matches up and draft cost is factored into it. So you can't just go in and say, I'll trade T. Higgins for CD Lamb. Nobody's going to take that. They might take that in week 6 if CD Lamb's not doing well, but not right now. So right now, what I would proceed with is pairing up someone like a Jonathan Taylor with a T. Higgins to try to go for a Drake London and a Kyren Williams. Because in ESPN drafts, Jonathan Taylor and Drake London are almost back-to-back type of picks. So essentially what you're going to be doing here is you're going to be upgrading at the wide receiver and taking a slight downgrade at the running back position. Because Kyren is basically around that same price range as T. Higgins is. But Jonathan Taylor, there's a lot of things that could go wrong here with his season because he's on a bad team. Whereas with Kyren Williams, as long as Stafford is there, he will have a good year in fantasy. So you're basically going to get a higher end wide receiver 1 with a running back that really doesn't have much bust potential unless there's an injury. So to me, this is a trade that makes a lot of sense for both parties, but particularly your party. Now getting into our next guy, it's also going to be another Cincinnati Bengal, Joe Burrow. I think his price is crazy this year in redraft leagues. 33.9 ADP on ESPN and 41 ADP on Yahoo. Now, again, the same thing applies. If you have either Jamar Chase or T. Higgins or both, you don't trade Joe Burrow. You can't get rid of that stack upside that you're getting with these Cincinnati Bengals players. These 2 or 3 guys can win you a week alone by themselves. So you don't send Joe Burrow away if you do have one of those Cincinnati wide receivers. But if you do not, and you just decided to take CeeDee Lamb in round 1, Josh Jacobs round 2, Joe Burrow round 3, for example, right? I think it's a good time to try to move off of Joe Burrow before the season starts. First of all, there's a lot of things that could go wrong with this one. Joe Burrow is in a particular offense that has never been able to build an offensive line. I mean, last year alone, he got sacked 48 times. He got blasted on every play, and he's a great quarterback under pressure. But the bottom line is we've seen this guy injured in several of his fantasy seasons. So that could definitely shorten his season. And at this premium you're having to pay for him in the third round most of the time, that's a tough pill to swallow, to be honest with you. Because again, last year Joe Burrow's price was a mid-round guy. This year, you're having to get him in the first 3 to 4 rounds of ESPN and Yahoo drafts. That's really early for a player with a lot of things that could go wrong, particularly being his offensive line. Now, the thing with trading a quarterback preseason is you have to view it a little bit differently, right? Because let's say that you went with Joe Burrow, right? But then the guy next to you in your draft, he ended up waiting to go with a mid or late round quarterback. So his strategy was never to go quarterback early if Joe Burrow was still on the board. He just wanted to get a mid to late round quarterback. So your values that you need to trade in addition to Burrow need to offer additional upside for him. And you might have to give a little bit of grace here with the asking price. So the idea that I've got right here is you want to give away someone like Joe Burrow and Xavier Worthy, right? Xavier Worthy, 5th round wide receiver in fantasy football drafts right now. I think he's going to be a really good player. So what we're trying to get is Bo Nix, who is a mid to late round quarterback in fantasy drafts, and I think has a lot of upside this season as well. But the good difference is that he costs a lot less in fantasy drafts than Joe Burrow. And you can also get Zay Flowers and Jalen Waddle back because both of those guys are going around 2 after Xavier Worthy. So what you could do basically is trade a quarterback who I think has almost the same amount of upside and 2 flex-worthy wide receivers, in my opinion, versus having a top-end quarterback and having 1 flex-worthy player. I think that this move makes a lot of sense. And again, you need to make sure that you keep that in mind if you proceed with a trade to send Joe Burrow away. Because most people in your league probably didn't want to get a quarterback early. So you're going to have to manipulate this one a little bit better. Now, getting into our next guy right here. It's becoming a meme at this point. Tyreek Hill, guys. Like, I just can't envision him in any way, shape, or form on one of my fantasy teams this year. And like I said, it's become a meme because I've been all over this all offseason long. Everybody who's been with me up to this point knows I don't like Tyreek Hill. Now, one of the big reasons I don't is because of his price. 31.1 ADP on ESPN and 36 ADP on Yahoo. My guarantee, and I guess one of my hot takes of the season, is that he will not be worth that price by the end of September alone. I think Tyreek Hill is going to blow up really fast, which means you need to act pretty fast on this one. So everybody assumes that it's just for, no reason at all that I don't like Tyreek. It's for very good reason. Tyreek Hill is part of research that I've done for 11 seasons now about wide receivers' sustainability as top 12 wide receivers in fantasy football. So what you can see on the screen right now is a list of players that I went through. And all I was trying to determine was how many consecutive seasons they went on top 12 runs as fantasy wide receivers. So you can see the player, the consecutive years of top 12 fantasy finishes, year it began and the year the run ended, the reason the run ended, and if he ever returned to being a top 12 wide receiver. So what we see with Tyreek Hill in particular on this list is that his initial run was only 2 seasons, from 2017 to 2019. Now, the reason it ended was because of an injury-shortened season. So obviously you don't want to hold that against him, right? So then he went on that second run that just ended this past year in 2024. That was a 4 consecutive season run as a top 12 guy. So what we have from Tyreek Hill in his career is 6 total fantasy finishes as a top 12 wide receiver. Now, if you look up towards the top of this list right here, you'll see the top 2 guys as far as consecutive numbers of years of fantasy finishes inside the top 12 are Antonio Brown and Julio Jones, both at that magic number 6. Now, last year, I predicted that Tyreek Hill would break that history and get into the Calvin Johnson territory, the Andre Johnson territory, where he gets 7 consecutive top 12 seasons. Well, that didn't happen last year. And I can tell you for certainty that it will not happen in 2025 because no player has ever started a 3rd run inside the top 12. And Tyreek Hill is going to be 31 years old this season. So Tyreek Hill, there's a lot of disadvantages working at him, not just inside of this research right here. He's also on a team that doesn't trust him anymore. His own quarterback said, yeah, you can't just say what he said last year at the end of the year when he said, I'm out of here, Miami. Deuces. You can't just say that and come back and think everything's going to be okay. So he's lost the trust of his locker room. He's also been dealing with injuries all offseason, not just recently, all offseason. The wrist, the oblique, it's been nonstop negative press for Tyreek Hill all offseason long. So this is just a player that where you're having to draft him, which is inside wide receiver 12 territory, it's not going to work out. So to me, again, you have to act fast on this one. So what I would be trying to do is getting someone like a Tyreek Hill and a Bucky Irving to send in order to get Drake London and James Cook. So again, you're getting that wide receiver upgrade, but it's also at a range where even the person who drafted Drake London may not feel like it's a super big upgrade to get Drake London over Tyreek Hill, and they'd be pretty willing to do that deal with you because they're going to get perceived the running back upgrade with Bucky over James Cook, which I don't think there's much of a drop-off, if at all, between Bucky Irving and James Cook in 2025, to be completely honest with you. So again, you need to act fast on this one. It will blow up really quick, in my opinion, and I think that this is a trade that would look really good by mid-October. Now, getting into our next player right here, this is crazy to me. And it's not because I don't like the player. I kind of don't. Jerry Jeudy. I've always historically not been as big on Jerry Jeudy because of attitude on the field and whatever, right? Like, we got past that last year when he was a great wide receiver in fantasy, particularly with Jameis Winston. But this year, it's kind of like a lot of people have thought we're getting Jameis Winston again, right? He's being drafted as 74.6 ADP on ESPN and 92.8 ADP on Yahoo. So that's a really steep price for a wide receiver who is going to be in quarterback limbo basically all season. Yes, Joe Flacco is the starter as of week 1. But how many games does it take until he's not winning enough? And then they have to choose, what about Dylan Gabriel? And then the same thing. There's going to be a quarterback carousel in Cleveland all year long. And my other thing with this one is that if you just look at the guys that are going around him, it makes no sense to pick Jerry Jeudy in this range. You've got him going 2 spots behind Jalen Waddle, 1 spot ahead of Jamison Williams, and 7 spots ahead of Travis Hunter, and 8 spots ahead of Ted McMillan. All of those players are highly ranked in my rankings compared to Jerry Jeudy. And again, it's not a player issue. This is a quarterback issue right here that you will have to deal with every week of the season in 2025. So every single week, you're going to have to debate to yourself, is it worth putting Jeudy in my lineup this week? So to me, what makes sense here is if I combine Jerry Jeudy with Breece Hall, who's going at a basically 5th-round draft capital, for Zay Flowers and Isaiah Pacheco, because Zay Flowers is going to be an upgrade over Jerry Jeudy with a better quarterback and is the wide receiver 1 on this offense, and Isaiah Pacheco, who I am actually kind of starting to get more in on as we get closer to the season, and I've seen him in preseason action look a lot more like pre-injury Isaiah Pacheco. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to send away 2 descending assets for 2 ascending assets. And I think the draft price will corroborate that story with a lot of your league mates to make a trade like this possible. To me, this is a winning move right here. Now, the last guy that I want to go through here is going to be DK Metcalf. I always kind of like to check out DK Metcalf in particular and how the community is feeling about him, because DK Metcalf has not been a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy since 2021. He's only declined since 2021 in fantasy, and his price on Underdog is just not the same as his price on ESPN. ESPN is a 50.1 ADP, and his ADP on Yahoo is 50.4. So he's always more favored in redraft leagues than he is in Underdog Best Ball. And Underdog Best Ball, just to be clear, his ADP is similar only because it's a 3 wide receiver format. But he's valued a lot lower in the wide receiver position rankings on Underdog than he is on ESPN and Yahoo. And I think it's because, number 1, Underdog has a lot of smart drafters going there. And number 2, a lot of people see what this situation is for what it is. What is going to happen in Pittsburgh this year is DK Metcalf is going to get double and triple covered a lot. You know why that is? Because Pittsburgh has no real wide receiver 2 in this offense. Yeah, it's Calvin Austin. Or is it going to be Roman Wilson? How many of you actually know what those guys have done in their careers? Roman Wilson didn't play last year for the team, and Calvin Austin has never been a volume guy. So essentially, DK Metcalf is going to be blanketed every single game with coverage. And the problem that DK Metcalf has had throughout his entire career, and I want to choose last year as an example because it was so bad, was what happens when you're in double or triple coverage, right? Where you're going to get a lot of contested catches that you're going to have to go up and get. Something that George Pickens, by the way, was very good at. But DK Metcalf actually has an abysmal contested catch rate. It's actually 19.2%, which puts him in 100th for qualifying wide receivers in 2024 alone. This is not a contested catch wide receiver. And again, that's what you're going to have to deal with when you're going to be blanketed by double and triple coverage for every game of the season. I don't think this one is going to work out very well. So to me, this looks like a situation where I could get a big wide receiver upgrade here if I manipulate the running backs correctly in this trade. So what I want to do is I want to send DK Metcalf and Kyren Williams, a running back I like, for Ladd McConkey and Travion Henderson. Based on where Travion is going in drafts right now, it's around the DK Metcalf range. Where I think it works out is that I could see Travion Henderson having a ceiling that's similar to Kyren Williams, but you're definitely getting the wide receiver upgrade with Ladd McConkey over him. So I think that this trade makes a lot of sense for me personally because DK Metcalf is just not a top 12 wide receiver, and he's not being drafted there, but he doesn't realistically have much upside to finish much higher for you than where you drafted him at. And if you have not heard what I have been working on all offseason, it's almost here. What we've been working on all offseason is automating the waiver wire process for you so you do not have to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning anymore just to try to make a waiver transaction. You wake up all disheveled and you end up losing anyways. So what we've done is a first in the fantasy community, which is you can go to fsroundup.com, hook up your ESPN or Yahoo Fantasy Football Leagues to our waiver wire tool, and it automates the waiver wire process for you. So you are able to sleep through the night and win your league by not missing out on waiver wire guys. And if you play other sports like fantasy basketball, fantasy baseball, fantasy hockey, you can also connect those leagues as well. So it's not just football. This brings value to you in all of fantasy sports, and it has never been brought to the fantasy space before. You will also be able to get my full rankings on a weekly basis on that site as well, but that's secondary because this tool on the waiver wire is enormous and it will bring you more value than you can imagine because it's never been brought to the space before. So just check out fsroundup.com right now. Just take a look at the site. It's a hype page right now, but it is going to be dropping very, very soon, sooner than you might think. It will be here just in time for the fantasy season to start to give you more value than you could ever imagine. So let me know what trades you're trying to make before 2025 fantasy football. And if you want to see the 5 buy low trade targets that you should be targeting before the season, click on this video right here.